Assalamu alaikum. Our next session is about anxiety and depression, and we are honored to have with us Deana Helmy. Deana was born and raised in Southern California. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and social behavior and a teaching credential from UC Irvine. She completed her master's degree in counseling with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy from Cal State Fullerton. Currently, Deana is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she is the Director of Counseling Services at IGNA Relief's Crescent Counseling Center in Anaheim. As a native to Southern California, Deana has been very involved in the Muslim community. Her passion has been in bridging the cultural gap between first and second generations, and she has worked extensively with youth and young adults in cultivating a healthy Muslim American identity. Understanding that personal growth is a lifelong journey, she has been involved in various personal development and leadership trainings with the hopes of using her skills to not only promote positive mindsets and lifestyles, but to also empower her community to examine a new narrative for America, one that is built on mutual respect, understanding, and connectedness. Please join me in welcoming Deana.
Assalamu alaikum. So first, just the have-to thanks that have to go around, basically. First off to Dr. Sidok for organizing this event, putting it together, and spearheading the efforts. For ICOI for opening their doors and joining with all of their support. To all of the speakers who have already spoken and who will be speaking, coming today to share their wealth of knowledge and expertise with the community. And most importantly, for each and every single one who's sitting in here, for giving up your Saturday morning and coming here to be a part of the solution, learn more about mental health and what you can do to reduce the stigma in our community so that we can be a better community, inshallah. So today we'll be talking about anxiety and depression, the very heavy topics, but inshallah it'll be an informative few minutes that we have together. We'll address suicide, some gems from Islamic wisdom, and then resources that are available in the community. Okay, so it's normal to feel anxious or to worry about things in life, right? And it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes we feel like, okay, we use the word anxiety and worry, we use them very simultaneously. And it doesn't mean that a person necessarily has the disorder. So if a person is going through, for example, financial hardship, and they're worried about how they're going to pay their bills, how they're going to pay their mortgage, etc., and they worry, that worry causes them to actually be more motivated to go out and get a better job that pays more, that supports them in that process. That's healthy. We want that. That's a good thing. What differentiates people is people who are just worrying in general may spend about 55 minutes a day worrying, versus somebody who may have a disorder, an anxiety disorder, who may spend 5 times as much as that. So they may spend 300 minutes or more a day worrying. And that obviously is going to impair their ability to function normally in their lives. Most people will feel sad, will feel worried, will have anxiety around major life events. So what are some life events that may, trigger some anxiety? You guys can, yes?
In-laws visiting.
In-laws visiting, absolutely. Yes. What else? Losing a job. Okay. What else? Being sick. Okay. Finals. So there are a lot of things that we perceive maybe as negative things. What are some positive things that we may perceive that also cause anxiety? Weddings. Yes. And what else? Marriage.
New child.
Having a baby, absolutely. Those are all things that happen in life that will tend to increase a sense of anxiety in us. Okay, next. So we're going to switch a little bit and talk about anxiety disorders. So they're actually the most common mental illness in the United States. It affects 18% of adults. That's about 40 million Americans. And then 1 in 8 children, that's 12.5% of children, have some form of an anxiety disorder as well. In children, when it's untreated, they're more likely to perform poorly in school and later on in life, resort to substances to kind of cope with what's going on. Next slide. So these are the big names of the types of anxiety disorders. We've got generalized anxiety disorder that affects about 5% of all Americans at some some point in their life. Separation anxiety, specific phobia, and have you remember these because the next slide, you're going to have to guess which one it is. Obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, panic disorder, and social anxiety disorder. So we're going to look at a few of these and we're going to compare when it's just normal worrying, everyday anxiety, common, maybe a healthy response to what's going on in life, versus the actual disorder. So, worrying about paying bills, getting a job, experiencing a breakup, other major life events. That can be an everyday worry. How many of you have felt that at some point? Yes. It becomes an anxiety disorder, or we're looking at it as an anxiety disorder when it's constant and unsubstantiated worry that causes significant distress and interferes with the daily life. So now it becomes more, we can see it as a serious problem. Embarrassment or self-conscious in an uncomfortable or awkward social situation. So how many of you have maybe had that at some point? Me standing up here right now, a little bit of anxiety there. No, it's cool. Okay, but when we're avoiding social situations for fear of being judged, embarrassed, or humiliated, can anyone remember back to the previous slide what that might be called? Social anxiety. Okay, so people will go to very far measures to avoid being in places where they may feel this way. A case of nerves or sweating before a big test, presentation, performance, or other significant event. At some point, yeah. How about seemingly out of the blue panic attacks and the preoccupation, the worry that it's going to happen again? Panic disorder. Okay? A realistic fear of a dangerous object, place, or situation. At some point, maybe, there was a dog that was running after you, you were out in the wild and there was a lion, probably got a little bit worried there. But an irrational fear or avoidance of an object, place, or situation that poses little or no actual threat or danger. Specific phobia. Anxiety, sadness, or difficulty sleeping immediately after a traumatic event. We've had that at some point, something's happened and just adrenaline is pumping and it's hard to sleep when your adrenaline is really high. Okay? But when it gets to a point where there's recurring nightmares, flashbacks, emotional numbing related to a traumatic event that occurred months or years before, now we're dealing with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And the one that I didn't have the little comparisons, okay. Obsessive compulsive disorder, it becomes excessive thoughts that basically feed into repetitive actions. This could be someone who has to check the lock on the door like 20 times before leaving the house. And it's not because it's just, oh wait, did I forget to lock, did I forget to turn the stove off before I left? That's okay, you can think about that if you were cooking. If it gets to a point where now it's like, okay, they've checked it once and twice and thrice and so on, then we're dealing with obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay. Women have double the risk for anxiety disorders than men. Okay? I know, women are all thinking like, well, it's because the men that are causing the anxiety in us. No. But women are at a higher risk for anxiety disorders in general. And anxiety disorders are often accompanied by other related disorders. So one of the key stats that we want to keep in mind here is 50% of people who are diagnosed with depression also are diagnosed with anxiety. So a lot of times they happen together. Okay? And one of the ways that people use to try to cope with that feeling of worry and they try to just numb that down is they will resort to substances, various substances. Anxiety can cause or exacerbate physical illness. So a lot of times now they're looking at it, they're seeing there's a mind-body connection. Your thoughts and what goes on in your head is directly related to your body. The feelings that you have, they're related to your health as well. And so many times people with anxiety disorders, there's a correlation with heart disease, with gastrointestinal problems, with respiratory issues. And again, like we said before in the previous slide, they'll resort to substances to try to numb or try to cope with a lot of these things. It may be hereditary. So obviously I know, and those of you who have taken any biology or psychology class in college, you've always heard, the whole, nature versus nurture debate, right? Is it genetic or is it environmental? And most of the time when they do all the twin studies and they look at identical twins and they look at various issues, most 99% of the time it's a combination. It's not just one of them. So yes, it may be hereditary. That may put a person at risk for developing an anxiety disorder, but alone, if it just runs in the family or there's that genetic predisposition, does not mean the person is going to be affected by it. So there's also psychological factors and environmental factors that take place as well. It can be managed and it can be treated effectively. So this is, those stats were kind of big. 18% of adults suffer from this, yet at the same time, there's so much that we can do. And a lot of times, one or a combination of these therapies will do the trick. So medication, which, primary care doctor could prescribe a medication, and psychotherapy, going to a mental health professional, talking to them, going through, looking at the thoughts that are impairing the person's functioning, coming up with healthier thoughts and exploring those patterns. And coping strategies, ways, coming up with effective ways to deal with life stressors. And then now there's big hype around alternative therapies as well. And so there's a lot of research right now on the benefit of mindfulness. And so yoga and meditation, learning how to be present in the moment, how that also helps in dealing with it. So switching over, that was anxiety. Depression, we look at it, what do you guys think of when you hear depression? Without looking at the slide per se. What comes to mind?
Sleeping a lot, oversleeping.
Oversleeping, sleeping a lot, Gaining weight.
Sad.
Being sad.
No activities. Not doing anything.
Not doing anything. So actually just losing interest in everything and just not really, not doing anything. So yes, all of those are signs of depression and their symptoms of it. So depression is a condition in which a person feels discouraged, sad, hopeless, unmotivated, or disinterested in life in general. So we said before that half the people that are diagnosed with depression may also be diagnosed with anxiety. So we're going to look at this still in the light of how both of them are they affect each other. Okay, so people go through this. It could be in response to a major life event. Losing a loved one could trigger this. It doesn't have to cause it necessarily. So big life events may be related to it, however, they may not necessarily be like the single cause. Sometimes for some people who suffer from depression, there is no cause. Things seem to be going great in their life, and they just have they're going through. They're not able to get themselves, up in the morning. They're not able to regain that focus that they had, the zeal for life, and just being able to do things that they used to normally do and enjoy. So again, we're going to look into it, and it is treatable. So it affects over 10% of the population. It's kind of, 1 in 10 people. So we know a lot more than 10 people in our lives, right? So chances of us knowing someone, chances of us ourselves going through this at some point in time, in our lifetime, it could happen. It's very real. So we're going to go through some myths, right? So anxiety, we kind of just gave you all the info. So now, these are things you may have heard. Yes?
There's a question about that statistic. Is that at any one given time, or somebody has been affected by it?
In the sense of 1 in 10 people
Yes.
will be affected by it.
Okay. What happened?
And so, yeah, I will look into the stat a little bit more. So in the sense of like, if they either had it at some point in their life, or they will be, yeah.
Guys, if you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll invite them over to you.
So depression isn't a real illness. How many of you have heard this before? Oh, just, snap out of it. Like, what do you mean everybody's sad? It's all in your head. Exactly, it's all in your head. No, it is a real illness. It's not all in the person's head. People don't actually choose to be depressed. So when someone is going through depression or they're suffering from depression, it's not a choice that they're making. There are psychological, social, and biological origins that go into it as well. And a lot of times people think like, oh, it's just a weakness of character. Like, you're not strong enough. If you were stronger, you wouldn't be going through this. And they may talk about this stronger psychologically or stronger spiritually. I've heard it in both ways. The idea that if you're just, if you increase your spirituality, you will never have depression. And that's not necessarily the case. Depression is real. It is chemical imbalances in our brain that affect our bodies and affect the way that we think, the way that we feel, and the way that we behave. How about this one? You can snap out of it. Just, come on, let's go out. You can totally get over this. Like, it's not a big deal. Okay? That's not the case. Again, no one chooses to be depressed. There's something going on that's a little bit stronger than them. They need that help. Next slide. It happened because of a sad situation. Kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, that sometimes depression happens, there's no sad event that took place. It's just whatever changes are going through in the body, that's what's happening. And sometimes it is. There's a sad situation, but sad situation doesn't necessarily mean that the person is going to go into depression. If your parents have it, so will you. People look at it and they're just like, okay, they want to know like the whole family history. Family history, when we go to the doctors, they're important because it tells us if we have a predisposition for it. If we know that we're predisposed, if it runs in the family, grandparents have suffered from it, parents have suffered from it, it may increase our likelihood. However, it does not predict that we're going to go through something as well. Which is a blessing, because the idea then that it's not just like we're not doomed because of a situation that maybe is taking place in the family. There are things that we can do, and there are ways to help ourselves. It only affects women. How many of you have heard this one? Or how many of you think this one? Okay, it's not the case. Women report it. They report it more. However, depression affects men as well. And one of the hallmarks that we know that this is actually true, very sadly, is when we look at suicide. And when we look at suicide, untreated depression is the #1 cause for suicide. And men are much more likely than women to complete a suicide. So we'll get into that piece a little bit down the line so that we know that it is real. Okay. And a lot of cultures, the reason that sometimes men may, or even people may look at it as no, men don't go through it, is the idea that men cannot express weakness. Men have to be strong. Men, it's not okay for them to talk about their feelings. And so that keeps people away from actually being able to embrace that and talk about it and seek the help that they need. Okay. So symptoms. Persistent, sad, anxious, empty mood. Feelings of hopelessness, this is one of the hallmarks, and pessimism. Feelings of guilt, worthlessness, helplessness. Loss of interest or pleasure in hobbies and activities, and especially hobbies and activities that the person used to love, used to enjoy doing, they suddenly have no interest in it. Decreased energy, fatigue, feeling slowed down. Difficulty concentrating, remembering, making decisions. I know some of you are like, wait a minute, I feel some of those. And so we'll get into that in a minute. Insomnia, early morning awakening or oversleeping. Low appetite, weight loss, weight gain. Thoughts of death or suicide, suicide attempts. Restlessness, irritability. Persistent physical symptoms that do not respond to treatment, such as headaches, digestive disorders, and pain, for which no other cause can be diagnosed. So these are a lot of symptoms, and probably at some point in time we've experienced different combinations of these, okay? And it's not that, oh wait, I've experienced maybe all of these at some point in time, that means that I am suffering from depression. The key here, go to the next slide. So we want to know the difference between like depression, or is it just the blues? The symptoms will last more than 2 weeks, and they will interfere with daily activities. So they're really getting in the way of you functioning the way that you normally function, and it's happening more than 2 weeks, so it's more persistent. Now it's at a serious level, and we would want to look and see what is happening. So there's different types, and we hear about them differently. We won't go into too much detail, but these are some of the major types. Major depression, this one affects a person's ability to basically function in their life. This is the classic hallmark. This is what we usually think of as depression. When we say a person is depressed, we think that they have no energy, they're just very down. A lot of times they don't even have energy to get out of bed. And the thoughts of just feeling like, you know what, it's just, I can't take this anymore, life isn't, it's just, what's the point, there's no point. This is a lot of times in this, in the major depression. Persistent depressive disorder, this happens like it's ongoing. It's a little less mild than major depression, but it's longer. It's over the span of 2 years. So this is a person who just, you know, they will show more of a just consistent depressed mood that's happening. Bipolar, based on the name, it means that we were dealing with 2 issues. So we're dealing with mood cycles. So there's either severe highs, which are manias, or mild highs, which are hypomanias, and then severe lows. So there's sort of a cycle. It goes really, really high, and then almost like there's like a crash where there's a real low. And then again, a little bit of time goes by, and then there's that high again. Okay? Postpartum depression, just from the name, happens after childbirth. And then seasonal affective disorder. A lot of times this will happen in places where they don't have the sun. It occurs most of the time around the time when like fall, winter months are coming, and it'll last through till spring. And it only happens during that time. So it'll occur the same time every year for the person. And there's treatments available for it. Okay, some more myths. Antidepressants can always cure depression. Not the case. Sometimes it can take up to 6 weeks for antidepressants to kick in. So a lot of times the treatment is coupled with psychotherapy. Antidepressants will change your personality. Not the case. They're working on brain chemicals. A lot of time it's working on the symptoms of depression, not your actual personality itself. People who are depressed will often refer to feeling like they're not their normal self when they're going through in a depressive episode. And so sometimes when they do take the antidepressants, they'll report feeling more similar to normal again. So there is a change, but it's more closer to their normal than it is to just changing their personality altogether. You'll have to be on antidepressants for the rest. I'm like speaking too fast, I'm aware of time, so I'll slow down. You'll have to be on antidepressants forever. Again, also not the case. This is something that you would discuss and you would go through with your, with a doctor. And a lot of times when people have been on antidepressants and they are receiving psychotherapy, so they're learning different skills, learning different ways of thinking to cope with, their various moods, they can be tapered off of the antidepressants. Talking about it only makes it worse. Has anyone heard this one? Or felt it at some point? It's kind of like, well, if we talk about the sadness, we talk about what's going on, then we're getting the person to dwell in that negativity, and then it's just going to be worse, and we don't really want to deal with that. Not necessarily true. Yeah, talking about it, the person is focusing on maybe negative things that are going on or their negative feelings, but imagine a person being alone with those thoughts. Like, that's a lot scarier. So it is really important in the process of treatment with depression for the person to have a supportive, reliable, non-judgmental person, listener in their life. This could be a mental health professional. This could also be friends. The idea is when we're helping someone, we're coming from a place of, there is that support and that love for them without the judgment, without the idea of you can just snap out of it, without the idea of like, this isn't real, come on, you're not strong enough. Like, get stronger and you'll be fine. Okay. So it is treatable, again, like anxiety, it is treatable. And it is a serious illness. And one of the bigger roadblocks to it is a lot of the stigma that people have and misconceptions around medication and therapy. And so, which are basically 2 of the most common ways to treat it. And other treatment options, again, alternative therapies or just different combination, combining different types of therapy and some lifestyle changes as well. Okay, so with this, we have to shift into a real topic, as if depression wasn't real enough. But what did we say the number one, when depression is untreated, it is the number one cause for suicide. So, true or false? People who talk about suicide won't really do it. False. Okay. People who talk about or attempt suicide want to die. False. Most of the time they don't want to. It's just they don't know any other option at that point in time. Anyone who tries to kill him or herself must be crazy. Yeah. If a person is determined to kill himself or herself, nothing is going to stop them. Talking about suicide may give someone the idea. This one I hear so much, and it could not be more false. Talking about it is not going to give someone the idea. If the idea is there, it's there. And talking about it sometimes actually gives the person a sense of relief that, wow, someone actually said like the S word, like they actually get it. And it's, you know, it's a big thing. And so, you know, sometimes, and there are trainings that general public can go to as well to just basically learn how to help someone who may be, you know, having thoughts of suicide. So suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in America, and 43,000 Americans die by suicide each year. And we're guessing this is actually very it's underreported because a lot of suicides do not get, they're not recognized publicly as suicides. So they may look like overdoses, they may look like accidents, but when they dig a little bit deeper, it's most likely it was suicide. So warning signs: talking, writing, or joking about suicide or death. Giving away prized possessions. You'll notice that someone, for example, that you know is just trying to give away things that really mean a lot to them. That's, you know, it's kind of like, wait a minute, but you really liked this, it almost doesn't make sense. Making final arrangements. Having depressive symptoms. This is a big one too. Sudden, unexplained recovery from profound depression. So they were really, really depressed, and all of a sudden, you feel like they're just a lot better, everything is great, and it's all good. Marked feelings of helplessness or hopelessness. Risk-taking behavior, self-mutilating behavior sometimes. It's not always, it can be a warning sign, not necessarily. It can occur by itself and not insinuate or mean suicide. A suicide plan. That's a big one. So if someone's talked about, or you've heard someone kind of talk about how they would go about it, like that's a huge warning sign. Significant change in behavior. Previous attempts. That's people who, I mean, most of the time women will attempt it more, and the reason that, but men will pick more lethal means. So they actually have, they complete the suicide. A significant loss, and chemical or drug or alcohol abuse. Those can be warning signs for suicide. So what not to say to someone? Because again, this is something, I mean, we know that a lot more people have thoughts of suicide than we actually talk about. So what not to say to someone? This will make you stronger. Okay, so there's a sense of not validating what they're going through. And it does not help the person. The person isn't, like, they want a solution, they want help. Time heals all wounds. So again, these are things that may be dismissing their feelings at that point. I know how you feel. We can't ever know how someone else feels. We can only know how we feel. It could be worse. Yes, but we don't know in their life. Like, I mean, it's relative to them. It'll work itself out. So we don't know for them if it's going to work itself out. And if they think it's going to work itself out, what does that look like? Does that actually include a plan? Okay, so this is sort of just another quick summary. So like we just said, don't minimize the person's feelings or situation. If they have a plan, do not leave them alone. Don't ever use reverse psychology. Like reverse psychology can work in other situations, not in this one. So this one definitely, we take it seriously. If we hear that someone is having thoughts, it's a serious thing, and we want to talk about it. Don't try to be a hero and solve it yourself. Seek help. Don't promise to keep the secret. Promise help. So they say, like, I haven't told anyone this, and I've been having these thoughts, but I didn't tell anyone, but you can't. Promise you won't tell anyone. No, we don't promise we're not going to tell anyone. We promise we're going to help them. We're going to get them the help that they need. And don't argue about the person's right to suicide. So how we can help is to listen, show empathy and concern, offer to talk offer to talk to someone in their support system. And a lot of times, if you ask them, is there someone that you'd like me to talk to? Maybe I can talk to them with you to kind of expand the reach of who can help them. Encourage them to get ongoing help for their depression. And if a person is at immediate risk, like that's it, call 911. It's okay. The cops will know, they'll be able to handle it. They'll get a whole team on board, but do not put yourself or put the other person in danger's way. Okay, so that was the heavy stuff. We're going to do a little bit of Islamic wisdom just to kind of, so I'm aware of time. I think I'm okay for a little bit. Before shifting here, there is a piece that anxiety and depression and suicide are real things. So a lot of times, again, like we said, anxiety may mask itself, or it may just appear, it's a continuum, so it may just be some worry that's going on right now. Depression might be just some normal sadness in response to an event or in response to situations that are happening. That's okay. We are talking about when it is more serious. So we'll get to the resources after this piece. This piece is more of a way that's meant to just kind of complement a little bit of the mental health help that a person may receive. This is more for just, the minor worries and the minor sadnesses. But it's not, it may not be enough. It may be enough for some people. It may not be enough for others. And so it is important to take serious measures in getting help for serious situations. So we talk about anxiety and sorrow in lighter ways. There is a daily dua that a lot of people may say in their morning supplications and their adhkar, which is Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazan. And the ham is sort of related to that sense of anxiety, that worry about, that worry about the future, worry about what's coming. Al-hazan is related to depression, thinking about the past and what's happened. And so we reach out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we ask for support in that, and we seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help in that way. So we also see that there is a religious foundation for these disorders as well, that it exists and that these are common issues that people deal with. And so what sometimes helps is having a positive attitude. In some ways, we're just having a positive attitude in Allah. So when we are making this dua, it's still also an element of thinking that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there and Allah responds to us the way that we want for Him to respond to us. Okay. So just kind of some more. So there's the adab bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub, verily the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does the heart find peace. And having, certain attitude of gratitude, being grateful. This one is interesting because it says, he who does not thank the people is not thankful of Allah. So a lot of times when we look at, this is reinforcing that we want human connection, right? So we're dealing with people, there's reasons to thank them. In the stress response for the body, there's actually a neurohormone that is released, oxytocin. People think of that wait, that happens during stress. No, that's something else. That's the hugging or the cuddling hormone. And no, it's released in the stress response because the body is basically seeking connection. When a person is going through a lot of stress, they need people. The body's saying, bring people on board. Be surrounded by that support. And so we're actually primed that way. And so there is this, it's almost like it's reaching out for help. And then that's a way that we can also support support others in that process. Okay. Trusting in Allah, knowing that whatever is, even with this idea of like if a person is going through depression, they are suffering from anxiety or depression, maintaining that this is something, it's from Allah, it's not a punishment. It's not a punishment by any means, but it serves a purpose in the person's life. And being able to see it that way, because a lot of times, a lot of the mental health issues, and I'm pretty sure the other speakers are going to be addressing this, but people view mental health issues as a punishment from Allah, or it's a sign that a person is not close enough, or they need to do more. Just pray and you'll feel better. That's not necessarily the case. Like, it could be something that we use, that we develop, but it's not just a single line that goes through both. Being patient. If it is an affliction, being patient. If a person has tried that, someone in their family has a mental health issue, maybe they're suffering from anxiety or suffering from depression, being patient in that process. And being grateful for what a person has. Those are some things that can help. So, shifting really quickly to resources that are available. So a lot of times, kind of need to put like primary care physician should be number one in these situations, because they would be the ones, if medication is needed in these circumstances, then they would be the one who are prescribing it. And then various options for community resources for mental health professionals. So up there's Crescent Counseling Center, which is a project of ICNA Relief. We've got Access California Services, are located in Anaheim, and Omid, Multicultural Institute for Development. They're in Irvine as well as in Fullerton. And they all have, these are all nonprofit organizations that have mental health professionals. In addition, yes.
Just want to jump in. Both Access and Omid have booths outside, so you can visit their booths outside whenever you have a chance.
Yeah, so they have mental health professionals. Also, there's a ton of the speakers who are here that have private practices as well. So if you wanted to go and talk to a psychologist or a marriage family therapist or a clinical social worker, that would be a resource as well, either for you or if it's someone that you know. And then there's a few things for suicide crisis hotlines. There's 2 numbers up there. There's also this new feature that the Mental Health Association came up with, which is Text for Teens. People that maybe don't want to talk to someone, but they would feel a lot more comfortable reaching out by texting, they have a number as well. And then ADAA, which is the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, they have a ton of literature if you want to go and learn a little bit more. And finally, there is this new app I just came across. It's called Happify. Check it out. Check it out. Not as a substitute for more serious support and help. However, they've got little games on how to be positive, and they have certain activities of changing the way that you think. So a little bit of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy approaches on it. So it's And I put iPhone app because I don't know if it's on Android, but I'm pretty sure it probably is. Okay, questions? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Very quickly, when you were talking about how women were twice at risk of getting anxiety disorders, is that because of the same thing that you mentioned with depression, where men are less likely to report it or to show visible symptoms of it?
With that one, I believe, and someone could jump on. So the question was basically, I think my mic is out. But the question is basically, with women being twice as likely to experience an anxiety disorder, is it the same as depression in that men are less likely to kind of seek help or to identify or to kind of suppress those feelings? Yes, that's a huge part of it. And also just in general, women, one of their big stats for that one is the post-traumatic stress disorder occurs more like in women being, for example, victims of sexual assault, more of that stuff as well.
We can add here that men tend to internalize symptoms and women tend to externalize. So men are experiencing depression and anxiety as symptoms within them, and they're not going to express or externalize the symptom like the women. One key feature that we see in men who are depressed is anger. So whenever I have a wife who's telling me her husband is just like angry and he wasn't like that, I immediately suspect that the husband might be going through depression.
Question, two questions. One is a very general question. First question is, are anxiety and depression statistics the same among Muslims, or are the values and practice of Islam somehow helpful in preventing depression? So, for example, you mentioned, substance abuse. So substance abuse, drugs or alcohol, but because, a practicing Muslim that wouldn't be drinking alcohol, does that not prevent them from relying upon alcohol to deal with the symptoms of depression?
So I don't have actual facts on it. However, I'm going to venture and say that Muslims are still affected comparably to the statistics that are out there. And one of the things also to be very mindful of, because a lot of times we have an assumption or we assume that we don't have substance abuse issues within the Muslim community. We do. It's really, it's real.
So about the same.
So statistic-wise, yes. Whether or not it buffers or ends up looking a different way, however, the symptoms and the disorders themselves still are affected.
And then the other question is a bit more involved. If anxiety and depression is triggered by an event or situation, will simply changing the situation or the event cure it, or does it start with a certain situation or event, and then is it kind of on autopilot until that, not the situation, but the symptoms and the depression and anxiety are addressed?
I'm going to say back to just so I'm clear that I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that if the depression and anxiety are triggered by an event, does it just go on autopilot and it continues until the event changes? Or is there ways that it can be like...
Okay, so let's say, for example, there's a life event or there's a life situation that triggers an anxiety and depression. Then will simply changing that life situation or event back to how it was get rid of the anxiety and depression?
So it really depends on the situation, on the person's support network, on what the need. Sometimes you can't change that situation. Like there's some situations that just they cannot be changed. The person cannot go back to how it was. So it depends on the person. It may not only, for some people it may help to kind of, go back to kind of altering the situation or the environmental factors may be supportive, may be helpful for one, but for another person it may not. It really would depend on the person's situation and all the, looking at all of the resources and supports the person has. Yes.
The microphone.
Okay.
Question here, Deana.
Yes.
So my question is in regards to helping the Muslim who might have thoughts of suicide. Would it be helpful or harmful to remind them of the consequences of actually committing suicide with Allah? Because I've heard that for some people that's actually been beneficial to them because it takes suicide out of the picture. It's not a way out, it's something that's potentially going to make things worse as opposed to better. So it's not, it might be something they think about, but it's not something they would seriously consider. So I wanted to ask if you have any experience of whether that's been helpful or harmful to somebody.
That's a very good question because I think a lot of people have that thought. So the question, everyone heard it? It's when dealing with someone the Muslim who may be having thoughts of suicide, is it helpful to remind them of the consequences of suicide with Allah? With this one, I'm going to say if a person is really deep in their thoughts of suicide, they're not going to be processing information the same way as a person who's just, you and I are sitting here and we're functioning at this level cognitively. And if a person is in a state where they're actually actively having thoughts of suicide, their thought capacity might be down here. And that could actually trigger to the point of like, wow, it could take them on a further downward spiral of, okay, then that's it, I'm so off and Allah is so angry with me and I don't even deserve, and then that could actually put them over the edge with it. So there is a piece when a person, and this is important also to kind of realize with different mental health issues, we're not necessarily dealing with, if a person is in the midst of a situation like that and those thoughts are going through, they're not functioning at the same level as someone who's just, we're sitting and having a conversation. So we want to be mindful of that. Their ability to process info might be a little bit, much more like cause and effect. We're able to look at 50 things that contribute to one situation. They're focusing on one element. And so, again, when we're helping a Muslim with thoughts of suicide, they're human before they're Muslim. Like, we're dealing with humans before Muslims. So the human need of wanting to feel connection, wanting to feel that somebody cares, wanting to feel that someone is not giving up on them and there's someone there for them, that speaks volumes to the person in that moment. And being able to just kind of help them down the line. I wouldn't go that route, and I would refrain from that because there is a lot of, there's more stigma that is generated in communities around, suicides, and it takes away from the reality of it, and it isolates a lot of people from being able to freely talk about it and get the support that they need because of fear of how they're judged if either, they have the thoughts or if they know someone who has suicide.
Sometimes in reading all these symptoms, human nature, like we have this, I have this, I feel like half people here think they're depressed. So can you just clarify, like when I think of someone who's depressed, I feel like someone who's sitting in their chair and just tearing off in their space for like half an hour. Like, what does a person with depression actually look like?
So it's going to look different for different people. If it's someone you know, you're going to notice that whatever their normal was is not normal anymore. So you want to look at the person's like benchmark of how they work also. Common things that are going to be there are going to be the feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. There's going to be lots of interest in activities they used to like to do. Things that brought them joy, like that's it, nothing is bringing a smile, to their face. They don't even have that desire to do anything anymore. There's going to be shifts in their patterns, but again, the key thing that we're looking at is these symptoms are persisting over 2 weeks. So it's, they're persisting for over 2 weeks and they're impairing the person's ability to function. So that's what we're looking at.
It's not just like a vegetable person who's just sitting there and just depressed and sad and looking down.
That's how they're usually portrayed, but it's not. It could be actually someone with you at work who's going through that. And you think, like, well, they're at work, so then they must be okay because they were able to get here. But no, they could be going through those symptoms as well. I know, and it's
We only have time for one more question.
Okay.
I just wanted to say for the brother, that's why there are some screening tools like PH9 and stuff. The best thing to do would be to make an appointment with a physician because the stigma of a person sitting there on a chair, that's not depression. That's just, movies or pictures. However, there are some medicines that can mimic the signs and symptoms of depression and vitamin deficiencies like vitamin D and B12, thyroid deficiencies. So it's best if you're feeling it, make an appointment. The worst thing they can say is, no, you're okay, right?
How can you help a person if somebody on the phone so that you have an anxiety in another state too?
You're on the phone with someone who's having a panic attack in another state?
I can't get there. My
No.
sister has that. I just called a couple of times and I feel so helpless and I just keep talking to her. And I know her. She's my sister, so I know her how to calm her down. But if some of your friends, they call you and say, I'm having a attack, and they know it all. How can you help them?
So, and when we're, okay, yeah, so, and I was gonna, so if it's someone that you don't know they're having that, then you do want to refer them to, to seek proper help from someone who can help them. And there's a piece also, there's that difference between yes, you would want them to seek medical help.
But right now, at that moment, they need help, and nobody's there for them. So what can you do?
you should still call 911 and let them connect to the state where their lady is and try to get them to come out. So you still have to go through your own 911 to get out to them. So just call 911 over here. Yeah, they can still connect. Yeah, interstate as well. And you were doing this as well.
I have a question. We have time. Is OCD easy to treat? And do you have resources in Muslim community of psychologists, psychiatrists to treat OCD? Because that will become very expensive in long term.
Yes.
Management.
Yeah, so OCD is treatable, and again, the list of, there's different speakers who are here today who are all licensed clinicians, and they work with these populations. There is help available. So any of the agencies, any of the private practice individuals, I know.
No, I'm sorry. I know there's a lot of questions. Inshallah, we'll have time one-on-one with the speakers later. I just left off from that. That was such a informative